The war forced the armed forces of Ukraine to become perhaps the most versatile military organization in the world. Such a large number of different weapons requires a lot of specific specialists who have to learn on the battlefield. But not only Ukrainians are learning from this war, the largest suppliers of weapons to the armed forces of Ukraine, such as the United States, Britain, and Germany, are also actively working on the invaluable combat experience of using their weapons. Today, we'll talk about the experience of 2 years of total war in Ukraine for its foreign partners. Let's start with the United States. Despite the gradual curtailment of assistance to Ukraine, the United States provided a wide variety of weapons in 2022 and 2023. What's the main lesson that a super technological country can learn in a land war with a giant enemy? Artillery, artillery, artillery. No matter how many stealth aircraft you have, in a war with behemoths like Russia or China, you need a lot of cannons. The best American howitzer, the M777, is actively used in Ukraine. It performed well despite the fact that it had to be towed. Trained artillery is inferior to self-propelled artillery in terms of its effectiveness, less maneuverability, additional time to deploy and leave the position, but the Pentagon's logic is clear. The fact is that there are only two 155mm artillery systems in the U.S. Army, the M777 and the self-propelled M109A6 Paladin on a tracked chassis. If the choice were made in favor of the second one, it would require the deployment of a much larger support and training system, which would take too much time. Also, it should be noted that the Paladin tracked vehicle has less operational mobility and can only be transported over long distances by trawl or rail. Although, as of 2024, the Paladins are also actively working in the armed forces because the Americans are well aware of the specifics that the Ukrainian army has to face. Another important thing to note is resources. No matter how rich you are, you can't shoot down a $20,000 drone with missiles worth millions. This is true of the Ukrainian experience and the situation in the Red Sea. The United States provided Ukraine with several anti-aircraft weapons, including the Stinger air defense system, the Avenger air defense system, and the Patriot air defense system.
Now, Ukraine's air defense now uses the U.S. Patriot missile system.
The system's capable of simultaneously detecting and recognizing more than 100 airborne targets and then continuously tracking 8 of them. It can also launch and aim up to 3 missiles at each of these 8 targets. The cost of supplying one Patriot system, which includes 4 launchers, is more than $1 billion. Nevertheless, the United States has its own benefits in this. The money that's allocated as aid is usually returned to the United States to replenish its funds with newer weapons. And a nice bonus, the Patriots in Ukraine are shooting down the latest Russian missiles. This will definitely be taken into account by the Americans.
Ukraine says it used the U.S.-made Patriot air defense system to intercept a Russian hypersonic missile.
The Russians called the Kinzhal missile an unparalleled weapon, but the Patriot was not aware of this.
I can confirm that they did down a Russian missile by employing the Patriot missile defense system.
Later, the mayor of Kyiv showed what was left of the missile. The fragment shows that the missile was hit with a penetration, which allows to estimate the thickness of the material. It also indicates that the interception was quite effective, with the warhead destroyed in the air. In addition to billion-dollar giants, the United States is also sending cheaper but no less necessary weapons. The example of using Switchblade is interesting.
The type of conflict they're engaged with today really is almost ideal for the Switchblade capability.
This kamikaze drone is used by such government agencies as the Security Service of Ukraine, the main intelligence directorate, and the Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, which actually suggests that Switchblade is not just a simple means of hitting everything you see.
It's really a combination of an artillery and a drone that has got the capabilities of both.
The Switchblade barrage munition should be used primarily for unprotected static targets. A perfect drone for the conditions of war in Ukraine, isn't it? The Switchblade was developed to help U.S. troops respond to enemy ambushes in Afghanistan. Close air support takes time to arrive, is expensive to operate, and risks collateral damage in urban areas. Now the range of uses will definitely expand. Thus, the United States not only actively assists, but also uses the experience gained. What about the others? For example, the UK has woken up from its geopolitical hibernation and is ready to show Europe what it can do. This country was the first to provide Ukraine with lethal weapons and is one of Ukraine's biggest friends on the world stage. The conclusions drawn by the British from the war in Ukraine are largely similar to those of American military experts. The main role in this conflict is played by artillery, the firepower of which has sharply decreased since the end of the Cold War. According to estimates by the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London, the number of artillery pieces in major European armies decreased by 57% from 1990 to 2020. General Sir Richard Barrons, former chief of the Joint Forces Command, said, "It was the exhaustion of the conflict that proved that even with a huge amount of modern technology, any force that confronts Russia must have scale." In addition, the British, like no one else, understand the importance of the air defense. That's why they provided the perfect air defense system for mobile destruction of all types of targets, the Stormer. It's designed to destroy aircraft, helicopters, or UAVs at low altitudes. The system can operate both day and night. It consists of a launcher for 8 Starstreak or Martlet LMM missiles and containers mounted on an armored tracked platform of a Stormer armored vehicle. It can carry 8 missiles on the launcher and 12 additional missiles. The anti-aircraft system uses guidance method based on the principle of flying in a laser beam. The automatic system highlights the target, and the missile is held in the beam and hits it. The claimed maximum range of the Starstreak missile is 4 miles. The Ukrainian military say that the vehicle is fully computerized. However, there are no problems with service. All the crews of these vehicles completed several months of training in the UK. At this stage of the war, the system is used mainly against UAVs such as the Orlan or the Lancet, which are very annoying for the Ukrainian armed forces. The British, in turn, are actively researching the system of logistics and crew training for these missions. However, we should also think about the future. Ukraine's allies understand that it's not enough to shoot down enemy targets, they also need to attack in the face of Russian air defense. For this purpose, American and British aircraft are the main need of the Ukrainian military today. Everyone's talking about training on F-16s, however, we should not forget that Britain also has its own production of quite successful fighter jets. The Eurofighter Typhoon is the most advanced multi-role fighter in the world, known for its flexibility and maneuverability. It's surprisingly compact. Just look at the size of the pilot in the cockpit to see for yourself. The wingspan is 36 feet, which is even less than the Spitfire. The length is 52 feet. It helps to be incredibly maneuverable, allowing the aircraft to change direction quickly and accelerate at an impressive speed. The flight control systems make the Eurofighter surprisingly easy to operate, allowing the pilot to focus on tactical tasks, which is very useful in conditions of limited training time. The cost of flying on the Typhoon for 1 hour is $5,100, which is not so much. But not everything's perfect. The design of the Eurofighter cannot fully ensure radar stealth. This is considered to be the biggest problem in the supply of aircraft to Ukraine. With the dominance of the enemy's electronic jamming radio, they have to fly at extremely low altitudes, which the Typhoon is not adapted for. Whether or not the British will fix this problem remains to be seen. However, the aid would be incomplete without mainland Europe, Ukraine's closest neighbor. The main lesson from this war that Europe has learned is that it's time to militarize. The era of 21st century wars has begun. In addition, Ukraine has become a kind of testing ground for European weapons, in particular for self-propelled guns that have never been in combat. For example, the Archer. Less than 100 of these state-of-the-art systems have been produced, and many of them are actively operating in Ukraine. The effectiveness of the weapon has already been proven in combat. When the projectiles fall on the heads of the Russians, the Archer is already moving to a safe place. This is exactly what is required. Thus, the Russian-Ukrainian war has taught the partners a lot, but whether they'll have to use this knowledge in practice remains to be seen. War and weapons go hand in hand with politics. Political decisions often determine more than the results on the battlefield. 2024 is a crucial year for the United States. On one side, the Democrats are nominating Joe Biden, who, if he wins, will be president until he's 86 years old. On the other side, there's the Republican epic. Donald Trump is the most likely candidate from this party. In general, the situation is indeed a crisis, as the fate of several countries may largely depend on the U.S. elections. Ukraine is one of them. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the United States has been helping Ukraine with weapons and money. Joe Biden promises not to reduce this aid, and Republican Nikki Haley takes the same position. At least there's some clarity in their positions. But Trump promises to end the Russian-Ukrainian war in one day. It's difficult to understand how he imagines this. Nevertheless, we can predict that his plan is to force negotiations through sanctions and lack of aid. Someone tell him it won't work. The defeat of Ukraine could lead to the direct involvement of NATO and U.S. soldiers in a war for the Baltic states, Poland, or Finland. But let's come back to this a little later. For now, please like this video so that the YouTube algorithms love us even more and our family grows with new viewers. Here we go. The assistance of the United States, which is a signatory to the Budapest Memorandum, allows Ukraine to withstand, but not to win. What does this mean? First of all, in providing mostly defensive weapons. In 2018, the United States provided Ukraine with the first Javelin systems. In February 2022, this weapon became a symbol of Ukrainian resistance. The Javelin system is quite mobile and easy to use. One class will be enough to learn the principle of shooting from it. The missile has a thermal homing head and can hit enemy vehicles from a mile away. An ideal weapon for guerrilla warfare, isn't it? The same logic can be followed when it comes to transferring Stingers. This is a fairly old anti-aircraft system, but it's so well known that its name has become a trademark for all manned portable air defense systems, such as Bazooka in the class of grenade launchers or Xerox in the class of copiers and printers. At the time of the last public count in 2014, the Stinger had shot down about 270 airplanes and helicopters. The Stinger missile doesn't even need a direct hit to destroy a target, as it's equipped with a non-contact fuse. The missile covers 2,100 feet per second and can hit a target 2 miles away. It's difficult to say what its effectiveness in Ukraine is, but even missiles have been shot down by this system. When it became clear that Ukraine had withstood, it became necessary to send something more powerful. Therefore, in the summer of 2022, another legend appeared on the battlefield, the HIMARS.
We've been supplying Ukraine with items from our junk drawer, as opposed to the high-end missile capabilities.
It combines range, accuracy, and mobility. This makes it possible to perform work that's traditionally done by dozens of launchers firing thousands of shells.
Yeah, they just got a fire one ready, fire command. So as soon as they moved out from the hide point to the firing point, we'll shoot that rocket and hit steel on target.
The unit is armed with 6 227mm missiles with an effective range of 20 to 40 miles.
There's just all kinds of operational advantages to that greater range.
This is an excellent deterrent weapon, but the system can also launch ATACMS missiles, which can hit targets at a distance of 90 to 190 miles.
We recognize a need to develop a unitary type of warhead instead of the bombless that could minimize the collateral damage on the targets that we were going after.
The Ukrainian army has recently received these missiles, which have excellent attack potential, but not the most powerful versions. Another excellent U.S. weapon that's perfect for Ukrainian defense is the Bradley. For 40 years, this armored personnel carrier has remained the main and still indispensable for the U.S. Army. The Bradley was nicknamed the tank fighter for its effectiveness in Iraq. It proves this in Ukraine as well. Since the Bradley appeared relatively late, it already took into account all the advantages and disadvantages of the Soviet BMP-1. Even Russian experts admit that Soviet vehicles are far inferior to Bradley in terms of combat effectiveness. The American vehicle was originally designed to destroy Soviet armored vehicles. The Bradley has a more powerful gun, stronger armor, and better cross-country ability.
Going to the full track gave them a much better off-road capability than the half-track design did.
The Bradley does an excellent job of repelling the Russian tankers' offensive fervor, but it still lacks offensive potential. But the United States is in no hurry to provide Abrams, one of the best tanks in the world, which are used mainly for offensive purposes.
There's no tank out there that is more lethal, more maneuverable, more ability to provide shock effect on the battlefield.
It's a highly advanced and super modern vehicle.
There's 1.4 million lines of code on this tank. It's a life and death situation out there, and you absolutely want to be able to detect, recognize, identify the target, and engage that target before it has a chance to fire back at you.
Such an amount of electronics is not surprising because this behemoth is designed for one thing: the destruction of any target. By the way, this tank weighs 63 tons, which is often criticized. However, the 1,500 horsepower engine easily carries it across the battlefield.
The many things that make the tank amazing is the ability to move as much mass.
However, it's not only equipment that helps Ukraine. Another area of assistance is financial. The United States has given Ukraine tens of billions of dollars in aid, but what's interesting is that most of this money still remained in the United States to upgrade the range of weapons that were transferred to Ukraine. In other words, Ukraine is being supplied with older weapons at the expense of the United States, which is replenishing its stockpiles with the same money. What would have happened if the U.S. had spent more and ended the war? Why is America in no hurry to help Ukraine with the offensive and the end of the war, using only a few % of its defense budget? Most likely the issue here is not military, and even more so not financial, but geopolitical. The United States is afraid of uncontrolled processes after the defeat of Russia. A quick defeat of Russia will lead to a stronger China. It'll establish control over the former allies of Russia and maybe even over Russia itself, becoming an absolute hegemon on the continent. This scenario will not suit the United States as it directly threatens the status quo in the world. It's much more profitable for America to gradually weaken Russia with the help of the Ukrainians. After that, Russia will have to forget about the war for decades, dealing with internal problems. This has been done many times before, and it's never worked. It will always attack, no matter how weak it looks. Therefore, as Lindsey Graham said about Ukrainians, this is the partner I dreamed of. They're ready to fight. They just need our economic and military support. They don't want our soldiers, so the idea that Ukraine doesn't matter doesn't make sense from an American national security perspective. It's just ridiculous. If Ukraine loses, Russia will have a gigantic platform and large human and material resources for an offensive against the Baltic states and Poland. And then U.S. soldiers will have to defend NATO's borders. From the U.S. perspective, prolonging the conflict is the only possible solution. The same opinion is shared in Russia. However, we should not forget that the only thing Russia is interested in is legitimizing its conquests, as endless expansion is the only possible way for such a backward empire to develop. Sooner or later, this will become clear to the United States, and the only question is whether or not it'll happen on NATO's borders. Be that as it may, Ukrainians continue to fight thanks to the help of the United States and other countries. And this fight will not stop even if the aid ends. This is the end of the video. If you liked it, don't hesitate to like it and leave a comment so you can help us understand in which direction we should develop the content. Thank you for watching. See you soon.